Welcome back to Employer Online. In the previous video, we looked at the key steps involved in preparing your contribution submission in EOL, including the 3 options you have for entering data. We'll now take a look at the rest of the contributions process, focusing on why EOL validates your data, some of the most common validation errors and hints on how you can resolve them, completing your submission, right through to payment, and reviewing some of the reports EOL generates that will help you meet your contribution obligations. EOL performs several validation checks of your contribution data so that it's more likely to be accurate, complete, and submitted in time to meet your obligations. Doing these checks when you enter the data means that you can deal with discrepancies as soon as they're identified. This reduces the amount of rework you'll need to do, including dealing with extensive reconciliations later on. After you've updated all the data for your submission, EOL checks the data, refreshes the contribution table, and displays a message under any line item that has an error. These messages are easily identified because they appear in red. There are 2 types of messages: error messages and warning messages. Error messages indicate an error that you need to fix before you can complete your submission. Warning messages alert you to a possible issue that might need to be fixed before you can complete your submission, or something that might need to be changed before you complete your next submission, or other action that might need to be taken. Let's look at some of the most common error and warning messages that you might come across, along with why they occur and what you can do to prevent them. Here's the first example of a warning message. Salary provided is less than previous value. This message informs you that an employee's salary is less than it was in your previous submission. To prevent this message, ensure that salary details, including any temporary allowances or secondments, are correctly recorded in your payroll system and in the submission. Sometimes an employee's salary will be reduced, for example, when their job role has changed or an allowance has been reduced or removed, in which case you need to let EOL know that it's not an error. To do this, click on the down arrow in the Reason for Acknowledgement field. Select the reason from the drop-down list. Click on Acknowledge. When you've done this, you'll see that the warning message has disappeared. Another common warning message is this one. Member contribution amount is different to expected amount. To prevent this message, make sure that you have the correct salary, contribution rate, and service fraction recorded for the employee in your payroll system and in the submission, because that's what EOL uses to calculate the expected contribution amount. If the details are all correct and you see this message, click on the down arrow and select the reason as we did for the previous one. Click on Acknowledge and the warning message disappears as before. Let's look at some common error messages. Member has elected tax option. The contribution submitted must be the same. You'll see this message if an employee has elected to make pre-tax or post-tax contributions, but the amount you've entered is incorrectly calculated or recorded in the wrong column, so it doesn't reflect the member's tax election. To prevent this error, make sure your payroll system has the correct tax election recorded for the employee, and that the pre- or post-tax amounts are being correctly calculated and reported in the appropriate column of the contribution table based on the member's tax election. If you get this error, you'll need to confirm that the amount and tax treatment are correct in your payroll system. If required, you can update the details in the correct fields on the screen. Another common error message is, new member must have a member contribution amount. EOL calculates an expected contribution amount based on an employee's salary and employment details. You'll see this message if you've included a new employee in your submission along with their salary, service fraction and contribution rate details. but not included a contribution for them. There could be a few reasons for this. For example, the employee has been added to the system, but they are yet to receive a salary payment. To prevent this error, you could amend your process to only include new employees in a submission if they've received a payment. To resolve the error, you'll need to make appropriate changes to the submission. For example, if there is genuinely no contribution to be made for this employee, you can remove the line item from your submission. Or, if a submission does need to be made, you can correct your submission and process a manual correction in your payroll system to reflect this. Let's look at one last common error message. Member is on a temporary disability pension. This error message means that you're attempting to make a contribution for a member whose employment status shows they are on a temporary disability pension. So EOL will expect 0 contributions for them until they return to work. To prevent this error message, if you have an employee who returned to work and is no longer receiving a pension, contact EOL Super as soon as possible so that we can update the employee's employment status. For additional tips on how to deal with validation errors, you can refer to section Resolving Error Messages in EOL in the EOL User Guide. EOL doesn't allow you to submit contributions that have unresolved warnings or errors. Some errors may take longer than others to resolve, so your entire submission could be delayed due to a few unresolved errors. To avoid this situation, you can remove the line items that have an error from your submission and transfer them to a separate error file. You'll be able to submit your now error-free contribution table, avoiding unnecessary delays. Then resolve the errors in the new error file and submit that separately. To do this, go to the pale blue header at the top of the contribution table. Click on the words Move All X lines to Error File and click on OK to confirm. If you return to the Review Edit Contributions screen, you can see that EOL has created an error file for you, so you have 2 files for this pay period. When you have an error-free contribution table, whether it's the original file or the error file, you're ready to complete the submission. To do this, scroll to the bottom of the screen. Click on the Submit button below the contribution table. When processing is completed, a File Details and Payment Instructions screen appears, displaying a remittance ID which you can quote as a reference when making the payment, the bank account details you need to pay into, and the total contribution amount payable for this submission. You can also download a PDF copy of this page, which you can save or print if required. Remember, if you've created an error file, you need to submit both the original file and the corrected error file, and you need to make 2 separate payments in line with the payment instructions issued by EOL for each file. After we receive and allocate your payment, EOL will issue reports that will alert you to members whose accounts have discrepancies that weren't picked up before you submitted. You may need to reconcile their contributions and investigate discrepancies. By proactively dealing with the necessary corrections and adjustments before the next submission, you can prevent a reoccurrence of the same issues. You can find these reports and other notifications relating to your contributions in your EOL inbox, which you can access via the correspondence icon in your dashboard. For more information on how to use Employer Online, please refer to the EOL User Guide or contact our team.